Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Houston heading on the road to play Oklahoma week 2. And I think what makes this game so fascinating is, and I've been kind of vocal about this Oklahoma team, I love this roster if this offensive line can come together. And we didn't necessarily see that against Temple. And we're going to get into that conversation a little bit more. Houston should give you another good look. And can Oklahoma win this football game with their offensive line still trying to figure it out? Yes, absolutely. Houston, I don't think is going to be very good in 2024. New coaching staff decimated by the transfer portal. But I think the big conversation for Oklahoma here is, hey, as we get into SEC play, like this team can be dangerous, but this offensive line needs to figure it out over the next couple of weeks. Want to get into some of those conversations, take a look at at least a few matchups that I'll certainly be looking at during this football game. Now, before we get into it, as always, number one, let it fly in the comments section. And for the Oklahoma fans, I'm going to be diving into kind of a little bit more of a recap in terms of what we saw from Temple. I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions on what you want to see from Oklahoma heading into week 2. And of course, if you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. The Oklahoma fans, y'all continue to show a ton of love to the boys. We love talking this program. Can't thank you guys enough for rocking with it. Without further ado, let's get into this one. And let's start with this Oklahoma offense going up against the Houston defense that I think the number one thing that stands out to me is UNLV ran the football all over them. They had over 190 rushing yards in that football game week 1. That's what I want to see from Oklahoma. And we kind of talked about this during the offseason. Oklahoma's offensive line was solid last year, but I think we want to see a little bit more of a physically imposing offensive line. And I don't necessarily thought we saw that against Temple. Now, I think there's a few conversations that need to be had. One, it was pretty clear throughout spring practice and fall camp that Oklahoma was still trying to figure out what their best five was. And I think as you turn on that football game against Temple, you can still tell that this Oklahoma offensive line is still trying to gel a little bit. And Jake Taylor missing that football game, Branson Hickman going down early certainly did not help that gel. That being said, that's the first thing I'm looking for in terms of pass protection. Are we picking up stunts and picking up pressures the right way? Are we working our combo blocks the right way? That all seemed choppy. But I think more importantly, you want to see a little bit more of a physically imposing Oklahoma offensive line that's, kind of reestablishing the line of scrimmage, which I don't think you saw against Temple. Now, I think Jake Taylor is probably has the most horsepower within this Oklahoma offensive line. So him coming back into the unit, I think is going to be really big for this Oklahoma offensive line. I think the last thing is I don't think Spencer Brown can play in the SEC. Yeah, I think Spencer Brown was brought in to be a depth piece, a veteran presence, adding some competitive depth to this offensive line. But I don't think he can start in the SEC, and I think he certainly showed that at the right tackle position against Temple. Look, if you are losing in pass protection against Temple, you're not going to win your pass pro reps in the SEC. So I think they got to figure out what that best five is. And again, Coach Bill B has a couple more weeks to figure it out. If this Oklahoma offensive line can figure out this unit, this offense is going to cook because you look at Jackson Arnold. I think Jackson Arnold, when he got clean pockets, you see the connections and you see the playmakers on this offense. I think the most fascinating conversation to have in terms of what else we saw from Oklahoma, the emergence of Bauer Sharp is going to be huge for Jackson Arnold. You saw them on the same page routinely in that wide receiver tight end connection. They use Bauer Sharp in all sorts of different ways. He's very good after the catch. Oklahoma didn't have a difference maker at tight end last year. They got a difference maker in Bauer Sharp. I think that's the first thing. I think second, Deion Burks is going to be a guy. I don't think they let Deion Burks really cook against Temple. I think they're going to let him cook a little bit more as you get into SEC play. The last conversation is I think the insertion back of Nick Anderson into this lineup is going to be huge. You guys kind of know my thoughts on Brennan Thompson. He is a very fast, he's an exciting football player, but I don't think always that speed translates to the football field. He struggles getting off the line of scrimmage with bigger physical cornerbacks who can put hands on him. I didn't think Oklahoma had that guy to stretch the field. Nick Anderson's going to be that guy. So as Nick Anderson gets back healthy, I think he emerges as that deeper third vertical threat where Jackson Arnold can push the ball down the field. But I think also more importantly, it's going to open up some of that underneath stuff for guys like Deion Burks and Bauer Sharp as well. I think the overall thing that I want to see from Oklahoma against Houston is one, get that run game going. I want to see the offensive line just win a little bit more routinely at the point of attack. And I don't want to see any more shuffling of the deck. I would like to see Oklahoma kind of find a starting five and just kind of keep it there. I think the shuffling of the deck stuff, you saw that hurt this Oklahoma offensive line in terms of chemistry. Guys did not look like they were playing fast out there. They looked like they were uncomfortable in their positions. So I think for Bill B, you got to find your best five, get them out there on the football field, and let that unit gel over the next couple of weeks because they're going to need to be gelled as Tennessee comes to town. Now, going over to the defensive side, well, I want to start, I guess. Well, no, we'll go over to the defensive side of the football. You look at Houston on offense. The offensive line struggled again, decimated in the transfer portal, lost multiple starters on that offensive line through the transfer portal. Donovan Smith struggled massively in terms of keeping the ball out of harm's way. My biggest takeaway from the Oklahoma defense, and I get it's Temple, that was not a very good offense. That's the Brent Venables defense that we expect to see in Norman. You look at the numbers: 6 turnovers, 4, 6 sacks, 9 tackles for a loss. That's the version of Brent Venables when he's operating at his best on the defense. And I think he has all the pieces to run his defense the right way. And you can tell him and Zach Alley are certainly on the same page in terms of how we want this defense to look, which again is a far cry from what you had in 2023. This is a defense that has the personnel, that has the coaching staff, that really meshes together. And you saw that kind of product against Temple. This defensive line is legit. It's really talented and it's really deep. And as these guys a lot of these guys are only going to get better, right? R. Mason Thomas, as he continues to stay healthy and develop. PJ Adebawore, Jaden Jackson, a lot of these guys are young dudes. Dominic Williams only going into his third year of college football. Like, it's a young defensive line that I think gets better throughout the season. But I think most importantly, it's deep and it's really talented, and they got a lot of guys who can do different things. And when you have the ability to stop the run and then get after the passer on third down, I think that's a really dangerous combination. Linebacker play was much better. Kip Lewis, Lewis Carter, they were flying around the football field. We weren't used to seeing that kind of linebacker speed with Jaren Kanak last year. We kind of had this offseason conversation of, we know we got a dog in Danny Stutzman, just a bona fide All-American linebacker. Who's going to be his running mate? Who is going to be flying around the field next to Danny Stutzman? It seems to me like it's going to be Kip Lewis, but you got a couple guys that I think provide you a much higher ceiling in terms of what they can do than Jaren Kanak. And I think you saw last year a lot of teams pick on the play speed of a guy like Jaren Kanak. Teams aren't going to be able to do that against Kip Lewis. One, he's put on weight, so he's a little bit more physical, but man, this kid plays with his hair on fire. He flies around the football field. Loved what I saw from the linebackers. The back end, they get their hands on a lot of footballs. I think we might still have some question marks about the boundary cornerback spot as they continue to try to get guys healthy. But when you have an elite pass rush and you have a safety position that I think is one of the best units in the country, and you saw Zach Alley get aggressive with these safeties. Like, these safeties were asked to ball hawk a little bit more, go find the football, get their hands on footballs. I love it because you got safeties who can be difference makers. You don't have to just stick them in that deeper third and just let them sit there over the top. Ask them to get their hands on footballs. That's what Zach Alley did. Big fan of that because, again, what is the version of this Oklahoma defense? What's the version of this Oklahoma team that is dangerous in the SEC? It's with a defense that is a difference-making defense, not just a good defense. They're smothering opponents. And you saw that version of Oklahoma show up against Temple. Now, again, we saw glimpses of that last year, but it seemed to fade away as they played better teams. You're going to ramp up your schedule a little bit as you play Houston and Tulane. I want to see that same version of the defense show up as you start playing better football teams, like a team like Houston. Look, I expect Oklahoma to win this football game. I'm a little less concerned about the spread and more what we want to see from Oklahoma going into week 2. Starts with the offensive line. I think this offense can be really good if this offensive line figures itself out. And this defense is going to be good. It's going to win a lot of games for Oklahoma in the SEC. So if we get a good performance from the offensive line, the stock that I'm buying in Oklahoma is going to be a little bit more aggressive. We'll see what we get. We'll cut it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.